Okie dokie. So Leslie Sanchez, CBSN political contributor and Republican strategist, as well as Vox senior campaign correspondent Liz Plank and our own CBS News senior political editor Steve Chaggaris are all here. Welcome, guys.
Thank you.
Happy primary day.
Yeah.
All right. So, Steve, what do you make of Cruz on that radio program?
I don't know. I better get all my staff out to wherever Cruz's headquarters is.
Exactly.
No, I mean, it gives us a reason to watch Nebraska tonight, right? I mean, I guess if Cruz does well and beats Trump, then maybe we should be looking out for something. It sounds like he was just sort of answering the question and without ruling it out completely. You never know what's going to happen, but there's no expectation that Trump is going to do badly tonight, and there's no expectation that Cruz is going to come out of nowhere and all of a sudden win Nebraska. But I guess if it happens, we're all ready for Cruz to jump back in, or at least he'll think about it.
It wasn't something that he was maybe sort of positioning just in case you get to a convention and he hasn't picked up all these delegates as we expect him to do?
Yeah, I mean, you know, he's so far, I mean, he said it. He said there was no path to victory after Indiana, and that's why he got out. And so if he wins Nebraska by a surprise, it's not going to give him all of a sudden hundreds of delegates that he's going to be competitive to Trump. I think it'll give him pause to think about why he dropped out, and maybe there's something left in the tank, and maybe he'll get back out there. But it sounded like he wasn't very positive about this whole thing. He was just sort of entertaining Glenn Beck's question and didn't want to completely rule it out.
All right, let me ask you guys now about these new polls that show the swing state data coming out. It's pretty early, Leslie. What do you make of that, though, showing Hillary Clinton in a very tight race with Donald Trump, should she be the nominee of the Democratic Party? And when you look at Bernie Sanders' numbers, doing much better against Trump than Hillary.
Sure. Now, the argument's been made that's the reason we could never support a Trump candidacy, because obviously she would win by double digits. You had Karl Rove constantly saying of the last 40 or so Wall Street Journal polls, there was never really even a clear competitive matchup. But what you're starting to see, it's still in the media. So we're so many months away. I wouldn't, rely on those polls. I mean, it's going to move around. There's a lot.
Right.
6 months away, it's going to fluctuate so much. But what it does allow is for some political capital for the Trump campaign to say, look, we can be competitive in November, which is actually going to help their negotiation going into Thursday in Capitol Hill.
All right, Liz, that other portion of the poll that I find fascinating, showing Senator Sanders head-to-head with Donald Trump doing much better than Hillary Clinton.
Yeah, and that's something that's not new. It's something that the Sanders campaign has been, putting out there as one of the main reasons why, Senator Sanders is staying in the race and why he should stay in the race. So it's not good for Hillary. Those polls are not, not good news for either of her opponents right now. She has two opponents. I mean, and they both only have one. And so I think we're going to see the Sanders campaign use that, whether they win or not tonight, but continue to bring back this idea.
Liz brings up a really good point about that, because we don't do that. We like to say, oh, it's Trump or oh, it's Hillary, but it is comparative. This is not absolutes, right? They're not in a vacuum. This is how would a Trump look against a Hillary Clinton? How would a Trump look against a Bernie Sanders? And when you start putting those pieces together, that's where the contrast is, and that's where the rubber hits the road.
Jump in, Steve.
Yeah, I think that the difference between Clinton and Sanders is obviously, I think people's viewpoints of Hillary Clinton are long baked in. There's not a lot of room for her to move on that. And Sanders, I think, has room to do worse or do better, right? So whatever we're seeing, Sanders versus Trump is not necessarily what we would see in 6 months.
Right.
However, the thing she has to really be worried about is in all three of these states, her unfavorables are as high, if not higher, than Trump's, which is, I think, a complete surprise to a lot of people, because the whole argument against Trump nationally as well in these national polls is unfavorables are way higher than Hillary Clinton's. Her unfavorables aren't great nationally, but they're at or higher than his in these three states. And that's going to be, A, disconcerting to the Clinton people, but B, almost maybe something that Republicans who are on the fence about Trump maybe could take into consideration and say, well, maybe this isn't going to be so bad after all. And so as he's trying to woo and unite the party, these kinds of polls are actually good for Trump.
I've heard they're calling it the Great Unifier.
Yeah, right. And I mean, to your point, I think what's so fascinating about this election is that we have two candidates. If we were to be Hillary versus Trump, two candidates who are very unfavorable, whose numbers have been very high, exactly, because they're very well known. To your point, Sanders, at the beginning had such low numbers and was able to really gain popularity through voters getting to know him. But Hillary and Trump, I mean, people's minds are pretty much made up. I don't know what more we're going to learn about them at this point.
Go ahead, Leslie.
Well, I think there's a lot to be learned about it, because nobody wanted to tether Trump down to his policy positions, or they tried, and it just didn't stick. This is really coming down to, if both have such high unfavorables, the next issue, trustworthiness, leadership, other variables become really important. Do you want to sit down and have a beer with a guy? Like likability actually becomes, which Bill Clinton did extremely well at, and Mitt Romney did not. So it's a relatability, likability, other variables that become important, and Hillary Clinton is still going to be in trouble with that area of trustworthiness. That's what makes her such a flawed candidate. It's not just the fact she has all this baggage, it's that trust issue, and Bernie Sanders continually repeating that, and then you add kind of the crooked Hillary mantra we're going to hear for 6 months. It's a really difficult message war to get out of.
But the question, I mean, we look at all these poll numbers and we're talking about the unfavorables that these two presumptive nominees have, but there's another question that I have, which is the demographics in this country. Do they favor the Republican Party? We can talk about the unfavorables, Hillary Clinton, whether people like her, whether they don't like her, whether she's a unifier against her or not. But the question is, can the Republicans win a national election in this election?
That is the most frightening part of this kind of story moving forward, because we know traditionally ethnic minorities move with the Democratic Party. 9 out of 10 African Americans vote Democratic. 6 out of 10 tend to vote Democratic. When you talk about Hispanics. But there is some marginal movement. We've seen for the last 2 decades that Latinos are independent conservatives. They're likely to look at the Republican Party. If we can be in that 40 percentile range, we are competitive nationally. You don't want to see a lot of slippage in that area. And also with married women or even divorced women, there's a lot of areas Republicans were starting to gain ground and they're losing it. And that does not bode well for a majority party.
And also, if you're looking at the Electoral College and you just take the swing states out of the mix, right? So whether it's 2008 or whatever year you're looking at for swing states, Democrats always have an advantage here. They're closer to 270 just looking at the Democratic states versus the red states, Republican states. And so it's always more difficult for Republicans to get to that 270 point, just from where we're starting today.
But, you know, the difference is you're seeing so much crossover of working class white that is moving toward a Trump candidacy. They like him. You also have a lot of conservative, former military Latino who really like his style. So what is going to happen, I believe, is it's historic in the sense that you have a lot of cross-pressure and cross-pollination, people moving and switching parties. You haven't seen that in a long time, but it could have an impact for the next 10 years.
And that's the big question about these polls, right? Ohio and Pennsylvania, right? Pennsylvania is not a state that necessarily goes Republican that often, if at all, in recent years. And so to see these kinds of numbers has to worry Clinton, because you're looking at white voters and working class whites that may be signaling that they're conducive to voting for Trump. And if that holds for 6 months, that's big trouble for her, because that's a big state. That's a state that usually goes, you usually can count in the blue column.
Liz, final word?
Yeah, I mean, white voters are important, but they're also a shrinking demographic. Our country is becoming more and more diverse. And so I think the Washington Post looked at, these white working class men that Trump is relying on. You'd have to have 7 out of 10 of them voting for him in order to be able to win. So it's an uphill battle.
All right, so you guys are going to stick around all day because it's a big day today in the primary. We're going to be talking to you all throughout the day. Thank you both, all 3 of you, I should say, for being here.